This session is specifically about illustration. We have three distinguished speakers from Poland who will address the topic. Furthest on my left is Piotr Naimski, who many of you will know just stepped down from the Polish administration and went back to his real daytime job in Nowy Sącz, where there is a private university of which he is now the vice rector. Sitting to his right and not to my immediate left is our second speaker, who is the dean of the Department of Political Science in Nowy Sącz, and somebody who comes very well recommended, Artur Wołek. And to my immediate left is Bronisław Wilstein, who is currently a journalist with Rzeczpospolita, but who some time ago, as probably most of you know, was the head of Polish TV, and before then had a very distinguished career in a number of above ground and below ground publications beginning in the 1970s. And I don't know whether you gentlemen would like to stand at the podium or whether you would prefer to sit, but why don't we begin with Dr. Naimski.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here at this hall once again in so short time. Probably you know that I was personally involved, in a sense, in the illustration history in Poland during the last 17 years. Actually, these few sentences which I would like to say, I titled for myself, Illustration in Poland 15 years later. Actually, listening to the distinguished Professor Elster, I added subtitle to this title, The History of Never-Ended Transition. Why I did it? You see, in '92, the Polish Parliament, Sejm, voted the legislation on illustration on May 28th, asking the Minister of those days, Ministry of Internal Affairs, to look through the existing, at that time, archives of secret communist police and reveal the existing documents on public figures in Poland. It took 8 days for the Minister of Internal Affairs to prepare first bunch of documents and send them to the Parliament. There are some stories about that. I tell you one. At that time, we had the same with many clubs, many parties in it. One of the leaders of one of those parties gathered colleagues, parliamentarians, not revealing the list which was sent to the Parliament on the hands of all leaders of the parliamentarian clubs. So he was keeping the list in his hand and asked the audience, his colleagues, now guys, tell me who of you collaborated? Stand up. One of those guys stood up. He was not on the list, didn't know. It took another, after those 8 days, the government of Jan Olszewski was voted down because of the, directly, because of the illustration procedures. the coalition which was formed against the government was called later on the coalition of fear. It took another 2 weeks to make decision by the Constitutional Court about this legislation of May 28th, saying that it was completely unconstitutional. The basis for those judgments was taken from the laws existing from the communist years, probably because we didn't have many others at that time. 15 years later, the new legislation on lustration was signed by the President on February 14th, 2007. It took 3 months up to May, 15th of May 2007, to declare by the Constitutional Court that the law was unconstitutional. And finally, in result, to stop the process of lustration. So let us compare these 8 days plus 2 weeks against 3 months. This is the measurement of the transition in Poland. And probably the other is that we did change the government this year, but we changed the government not because of the illustration for sure. And this is another measurement of the transition in Poland. Probably more optimistic. I have, again, here in front of me, excerpts from the newspapers taken from those 3 months between February and May 2007, this year. Just to give you an examples of the titles of ideas being described or taken to the surface during this vigorous, sometimes vicious discussion about the illustration. It starts with Gazeta Wyborcza, which claims that the journalist from the newspaper has spoken with the justices of the district courts in Szczecin, Warsaw, Katowice and Poznań. Majority of them are most reluctant to pursue illustration duties. The other is, what will be the consequences of those who admit having cooperated with the secret police? The Illustration Act, as it is, does not give an answer to that crucial question. It does not require the laying off, and it does not prohibit the employment of persons who have confessed to their cooperation with the secret police. An article, and so on. What does it mean? It means that the new law, which was discussed and by some media, some journalists, some circles vigorously rejected, was very mild. The new law said that it's necessary to say publicly, to make it short, that somebody collaborated with the secret police. But it didn't result in any punishment admitting the collaboration. The punishment was connected not with the collaboration, was connected with the filling the forms and sending them to the authorities, or avoiding this sending of the appropriate forms. So it was rather technical. than in merit. The most prominent opponents are against the journalists. Some of them force people to choose between anarchy and despotism. This was the line taken once again by Gazeta Wyborcza. Some others were opposing this stand, particularly the journalists from Rzeczpospolita and Dziennik, the other two major newspapers in Poland. The problem is that this time the camp opposing the illustration was not able to take the whole media. They had some of them, but not all of them. This is also the measurement of the transition in Poland. Once again, optimistic. The other circle which was strongly against the illustration during these specific 3 months were academics. I mean, professors, people working at the universities, higher education institutions, and so on. Rectors of the Polish universities, polytechnics, they declared, about 100 of them, they declared that the new law compromises the law about higher education in Poland, that it is against the autonomy of the universities in Poland. They decided to wait with the fulfillment of the provisions of the law up to the decision of the Constitutional Court, hoping that the Constitutional Court would undermine the legislation, rightly so. By the way, the case was sent to the Constitutional Court by the post-communist party SLD. Once again, they decided to do this, let's say, dirty job. The third environment or circle, which was partly against the new legislation, was the clergy. Once again, some of the bishops, Bishop Pieronek this time, said publicly that the illustration is or could be against the provisions of concordat between Poland and the Holy See, giving the church institutions autonomy in Poland. The reality was that the Catholic academic institutions, they were the first who started to fill those forms and send them right away to the Institute of National Memory, which under the law was the place where they were collected. So it shows very interesting thing. Just I would like to say it on the margin. In 1992, when we started the process of illustration for the first time, we decided, we who were working on that at the government at that time, we decided to put the documents, files, if they existed at that time in the offices, on the side, just hoping that the church in Poland is so powerful that it would be possible for the church to self-clean itself somehow. After 15 years, we already know in Poland that Polish Catholic Church is really the part of the Polish nation and Polish society. And the divisions which we are witnessing in a wider sense, almost everywhere in Poland, they touch also the church. Inside the church, we have just regular people willing to reveal even difficult truths or defending themselves or the institutions against the truth. I hope that the previous one will prevail. The last items which I had here are from the last issues of newspapers this summer in Poland, July. So after the decision of the Constitutional Court, the Institute of National Memory was pressed to send out already submitted forms to the institutions or individuals who sent them before, and also because of certain provisions of this new stand of Constitutional Tribunal, the archives of the Institute of National Memory have been in practice closed. So for many people in Poland, also across the political scene, was obvious that the law should be somehow improved very fast. So the small amendment has been sent to the Parliament, and Parliament passed it very fast. So for journalists and researchers, the archives are once again open. Also, the second item of, important item of the Constitutional Court decisions has been improved, means the nature of the forms which people are asked to fill out. Actually, I have in front of me a letter which I've got from the office of the Prime Minister in Poland, asking me to fill out once again the necessary forms because the previous one were declared unlawful. I'll do it. At the end, I would like to say two things. First, I would like to tell you briefly what the Constitutional Court's decisions mean for the illustration process. Still we have the law, we have the legislation, but there is no penalty for people who are going to disobey this legislation. So in practice, for example, people from Gazeta Wyborcza, they are able not to submit necessary documents and live in calm without any consequences. Also, and probably this is the most important which happened. The other thing is that the Institute of National Memory is not able to complete the list of former collaborators. Under the previous law, the Institute was obliged to combine such a list and publish it consequently. Probably the other 30 or 33, something like that, items are less important. What I would like to say at the end, there are a few words about why, in my opinion, the illustration is important, still important in Poland. You see, the whole thing has, in my opinion, probably 3 layers. The first one touches directly something which can be described as state security concerns. It touches the persons vulnerable, possible to be blackmailed because of their past. It is important. It is dangerous for the state. Of course, with the time, it's less and less important. But still, we have to remember that people now 40, 45 years old and up, there are people who are, or could be, some of them they were, involved in these secret services practices in communist Poland. Now, they are acting in a public life. They are present in the economic environment. They are doing many things which are important for the country. And they are tied by hidden past. Still, some of them, they are. Probably the cases revealed during the dissolution of the military service WSC, which was the military counterintelligence in Poland, is the best example of those unpleasant ties and cases. The second layer touches long-term results, means results in education, activity, certain standards of activity in public domain, so-called, as I sometimes keep saying, rules of engagement. This is military description. Rules of engagement for politicians or for public figures in a wider sense. And the third layer is a moral and historic or combined approach. It was touched upon by the Professor Elster and the discussion today, previous discussion. It's about justice, it's about the desire for truth, it's about sometimes revenge, but you see, revenge is a difficult word. I believe that sometimes we may have legitimate revenge. So, saying that, I believe that probably the first part of the arguments is, is less or will be less and less important, mostly because in, let's say, 10 years or 15 years from today, or 20 years from today, we will be able to discuss the whole thing in these terms as we are discussing now the Spanish case. But not, it's different with the second and the third, because the results in education, they are harming, because they are among us. They are harming new generation of Poles. And if we are not able to solve the problem, if we are not able to tell young people in Poland that white is white and black is black, and that honest man is an honest man and dishonesty is dishonesty, it's difficult, it will be difficult to construct, let's say, normal Poland in 20, 30 years ahead of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Piotr.
Okay. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for securing the European weather. We didn't have any shock after coming here. Actually, after this testimony from Dr. Naimski, I could rather more academic adventure. Namely, I decided to be a little bit controversial, I hope, and to question the basic assumption of the conference, namely that that lustration is about history. Well, because to my mind, there is something to it. Okay, history is important in the in this problem, and backward-looking justice is probably a key to the understanding of the illustration problem. But to my mind, illustration, first of all, is about the present politics, and is first of all about legitimacy. Okay, so this is my story about illustration as an instrument for the enhancement of legitimacy, and this is perhaps why the illustration returns, especially in Poland. But well, I didn't realize that the Spanish example is still alive among academia. I mean, the example of Spain as the pattern for the Central Eastern European countries. But well, I don't know. It's just a digression. But if they work like this today in Spain, I mean, Zapatero tries to return to the conflict with Franco, perhaps this is again about legitimacy. I'm not convinced that this is about emotions of the revenge, so on and so forth. Let us leave the emotions to the psychologists. And well, political scientists should try to research something more researchable, I would say. So this is perhaps also about legitimacy. Okay, what I mean. So if you have a transition like in Central Eastern Europe that is non-revolutionary, which means continuity of the elites, continuity of the legal order, continuity of the institutions, and probably most important, the continuity of certain informal rules, you have to prove to your electorate that something had changed. Because if not, if all the institutions are filled with the old elites, as it happened in Poland in 1993, for instance, well, people may ask questions, okay, so what's new about this regime? And the philosophers and political scientists' answer is, okay, this is the legitimizing principles that are new. It's not the rule of the only party, but this is a democratic process that returned the post-communist party to power. But first, this is quite an abstract for a medium voter, as political scientists say. Well, he or she may suspect that maybe behind the formal rules of democracy there is something. I don't mean a plot. I'm not one of these who look for plots. But I've got a brilliant quotation from Guillermo O'Donnell, who researched Latin American transitions, and this applies to Latin American transitions, but to my mind also to Central Eastern European transitions. So O'Donnell cites this famous Adam Przeworski's definition of consolidated democracy as a place where democracy is the only game in town, and O'Donnell says that this does not preclude the possibility that the games played inside the democratic institutions are different from the ones dictated by their formal rules. Okay? So the full institutional package is here, but inside this package something is happening that is not desirable from the point of view of the formal institutions. And this indicates why people may be quite suspicious about new democracies. Okay? Are they really new? Are they really democratic if there are certain informal rules within the formal institutions? Formal institutions are perfect in terms of the legal setup, but within them there is something wrong. And this questions the legitimacy of the whole system. And to my mind, lustration is an attempt to answer these questions about legitimacy. An instrument, first, to change the informal rules of the privileged position of the nomenclatura, of the secrecy of public life, so on and so forth. This is the first aim of lustration. And not less important, to prove that there is a discontinuity of the rules. Okay, so first it's more like institutional change, institutional task of the lustration, and the second one is more like ideological, yeah, that's a good word, ideological task of the lustration. Which means that this is not a backward-looking instrument to deal with the past, but it's more like forward-looking to solve present problems of legitimacy of the present democracies. And a good example is the Polish specialty, which is the legal institution of the lustration lie. Okay, I don't know how far you are familiar with this, so just a short introduction. So according to Polish law, and this is, at least to my mind, to my best knowledge, this is Polish specialty, even though it was invented by lawyers hired by George Soros in Budapest. So the Polish law says you may have been a cooperator of the Secret Service, but provided you declare this in a formal declaration, nothing would happen to you. What is punishable is if you lie in this formal statement of collaboration or lack of collaboration. This institution is, on the one hand, it's a sort of weak instrument to break the rules, the informal rules of secrecy, because it discloses the fact of collaboration, and it breaks the ties of the former collaborators, and probably this answers the requirements of the anti-blackmail instrument. On the other hand, it doesn't break bring the break in terms of ideology, namely the fact of collaboration is not declared to be anything unlawful or bad in terms of morality, nothing like this. It's the security of the country, it's the disclosure of the fact in order to give the information to the voters. So it's not about the second aim of the illustration, but it's about the first aim of the illustration, the break of the informal ties and informal rules. But what was the practice of lustration in Poland after 1997 when it was introduced? Basically, the practice was the opposite. So the courts expected, sort of unthinkable evidence in order to declare somebody a lustration liar. And the Supreme Court decided that there has to be a signed declaration, and the fact of collaboration had to be harmful in order to declare anybody a lustration liar. So basically, this first principle, this first task was not fulfilled. But in terms of ideology, something really important happened in 1997, namely, all politicians who were suspected to be collaborators were sort of stigmatized, and except for the post-communist party, they all stood down. They resigned, and there was a sort of practice that if you are suspect of collaboration, your public career is in danger, or even has just ended. Obviously, it doesn't apply to the post-communist party. And this legitimacy approach explains quite well the happenings of last year, namely the Lustration Act prepared in the previous Sejm. Namely, this act was quite radical in terms of both tasks of lustration, that is, changing the informal rules and changing the ideology of continuity. But from the very beginning, at least to my mind, it was sentenced to end up in the Constitutional Court and to be declared unconstitutional. Well, judicial politics is politics as always. So everybody knew that this sort of act will be invalidated will be declared void by the Constitutional Court. This was obvious for everybody. I mean, I don't expect that any reasonable politician in Poland or a journalist would expect that the Constitutional Court would accept this sort of law, which inflames suspicions that perhaps the Law and Justice Party and Kaczynski brothers were not that great fans of lustration, and they decided just to, inflame the whole conflict, and to use the conflict as a vehicle for the political aims, and not to have lustration itself. And there are good arguments for this sort of reasoning, but what is more important, perhaps, is the fact that for the lustration itself, understood as an legitimacy enhancement instrument, the talk about lustration, the lustration debate, the lustration conflict was even more important than lustration itself. Okay? So these very happenings of 2007 brought a sort of semantic revolution, something like the change of the mindset, and probably this might be a conclusion, that even though the first objective of the illustration, the real break in the informal rules was not accomplished, the second aim, the change in the ideology of continuity really happened in 2007. But there is a postscript to this conclusion, namely the early elections of the fall 2007. And Professor Elster argued that the new coalition would not, maybe it was Professor Mitko, anyway, would not support the illustration case that much, and perhaps this conference is not that up to date as he might have thought. So it has to be stressed that the Illustration Act of 2007 was written by both Law and Justice and Civic Platform. And the Civic Platform Party was one of the, well, probably at least some politicians from the Civic Platform were more radical lustrators than the Kaczynski brothers. So perhaps, well, definitely there was a change in the Polish mindset in 2007, even though the radical change in the informal rules didn't happen. Thank you.
In 1990, I was the chief of radio in Krakow. It was a time when Krzysztof Kozłowski became the first non-communist Minister of Interior Affairs. I knew him, so I asked him, and in this moment, he became responsible of this archive of Communist Security Service. So I asked him of the access of the journalists to this archive. And he was furious that it was the best solution, it was to destroy this archive, burn them all. And he told me the story about a young woman who was forced to be agent to sign the list. And when he knew that Solidarność came to the power and could open this archive, she committed suicide. So I was really moved by this. But I already said I started to look for this woman, and I didn't find her because she doesn't exist. As all of these victims of terrible lustration, it doesn't happen in Poland in reality. It's continuing, but in another form. So I started to look for this woman because in this moment I realized, I was moved by, in the same moment I realized that it could be an element of strategy of the people who don't want to have lustration in Poland, especially people from former communist security police. And there was very clever strategy to change, to distort the sense of the notion. Agent became victim, in this situation. He could commit suicide, he or she poor because they're forced, etc., etc. We start to interest of the inner life of the agent, and we are forgetting about not so interesting people whose life were destroyed by this agent, who were really victims, and the victims of these agents. And there is the problem, I think, much larger. And the lustration is the problem larger, because it is touching a lot of very important issues, even democracy. Because Piotr Naimski already said it, but we have to mention that who is the politician in democratic system is representative of the people. The people have to have possibility to choose. And if they don't know the past, so important fact, because it's rather obvious that the being agent is something important in the biography of the politicians. So their possibility to choose is limited. The choice is limited. Democracy is limited in this one. And it raises another question. Who has the right to forbid to the people to know their past? Because lustration, touching the problem of archive of security, of communist security service. And I think all historians agree that this archive is one of the most important, one of the biggest source of our history, of the history of Poland under the communist regime. So if we don't want to have lustration, we have to close up this archive. And so we close up our history. Maybe I have to say another story, because Piotr Naimski mentioned that the one of the centers of the anti-lustration propaganda is Gazeta Wyborcza, and Adam Michnik, of course, he is one of the biggest enemy of the lustration in Poland. But he doesn't follow his advice and his interpretation, because at the beginning of the 90s, it was created so-called commission. There was 3 historians, Einenkiel, Holzer, and Michnik. Michnik, he finished the history, he's rather well known from another thing, but of course we could call him as historian. And they were in this archive. They were in this archive, they were searching in this archive during few months, and after Michnik declared that this archive are bad, aren't good for us. I think he took responsibility for him to dig in such terrible things, after to discover to us that it's better for us to keep away from such things. But I prefer to decide by myself. So I think that we, as Poles, as a nation, we should have the right to know about our history, especially that this history is known, this archive is known, because we could be sure that the most important part of this archive are are in Moscow. We could be absolutely sure. We could be sure that they are not only in Moscow. We know also that, of course, for the majority of the Poles, this archive are closed, but not for the former member of security police from the communist time, not from the people from nomenclatura, highest rank of nomenclatura. We know even example. I think everybody here know who is Jerzy Urban, spokesman of regime of government of Jaruzelski, president of public state television. After the fall of communism, he created weekly Nie, No. And in this weekly, he used the information about who was the agent. Of course, he used it in a special sense because this weekly is very is politically orientated, is against Solidarność, against Church, so he used it against his enemy. So they are the people who has this information. And the enemy of lustration repeat all the time that they are against wild lustration. But this wild lustration is going on. We couldn't avoid it because they are the people who has access to this information. Even we know that the that they were the functionary who took partly the element who made the copies and took with them. So they possess this information. So they are all the time there are the rumors, there are the gossips, and there are one solution for this: to open this archive, make illustration, and to know who is who. Because there is a kind of elementary knowledge, I think. Piotr Naimski mentioned already, because we are asking why. Because we have to know who was who was the hero and who was the traitor. If the fact of discovering the collaboration with security, with communist security police, was so shameful, we have, in the same moment, if we declare it, we declare that it was the shameful, it was evil. So we have to, if somebody is, because they were this agent, were member of, lot of them, they were member of opposition movement, member of Solidarność. They presented themselves as a freedom fighter who fought against communism. So we have to know who these people were in reality. Of course, the argument used against lustration is argument, the ones I already mentioned, that in reality the agents, they were victims in reality. And I can agree that they were certain different level of collaboration. We could imagine that they were, and we know such a fact, that they were the people who were really forced and tried to avoid to collaborate in reality. They tried to make try to avoid to make harm against their friends and their milieu. But to know it, we have to make illustration. To know it, we have to open this archive and to analyze it. There is the argument which is used by the enemy of illustration that we couldn't base on this archive because the functionary lies in this. They are mystificated there. And that is really almost improbable because they were under so heavy responsibility. There was the system of checking up this information that the possibility to lie was very little. Of course, we could say all the human's activity are imperfect. So even this archive aren't absolutely complete. They are things which we have to check it, but to know it, we have to once more, you have to open this archive to know it. Because this argument that is of the imperfectness of this archive, you can use it against all the archives. And there is also the argument that, of course, the Communist Security Service organized the provocation, organized try to blame the people, to show them in the bad lights, etc. That is true. That is true. But this act were documented, and documentation is in this archive. So we have to know about it, and that is the reason, one more, to open this archive and to make illustration. The situation in Poland, Mr. Professor Elster said that there is a situation if the people are committed things so shameful as collaboration with security police that really they could commit suicide. But not it, we have to create the atmosphere of the condemnation such acts. There aren't such atmosphere in Poland. This atmosphere is unhealthy. This situation when we don't know who is the villain, who is the victim, if the how could we treat these agents? Such situation is unhealthy and will be unhealthy until the discovering this archive and to finish the illustration.
Thank you. Okay, we have time for questions, which I invite. Please use the microphone.
I have a very short, just technical questions. The files are not open, right? They're not open. In Berlin, they were open around 92. The Stasi files. Anybody could apply, and you could go through your files. Just as I understand it, they're not open.
No, they are open for the scientists and for journalists, but in certain sense you have to appeal, you have to, you have to wait.
They're also open for everybody, every person who would like to look through its own file.
You're right, just like in Berlin.
In Berlin, yes. I mean, it's not the same case. You know, in Berlin, Stasi's archives are almost open totally. Almost, because, for example, Helmut Kohl was able to close his archives.
Okay, that was a very special case.
Okay? No,
but
why special?
But there was one
why
limitation.
Why Helmut Kohl is special?
There was one limitation, and I presume it's the same, is that names that could relate to an individual agent or a person that was reporting on you was crossed out.
Yeah,
that was true of the...
But
I went through my files in Berlin, and that was...
No, but you can ask in Poland, everybody can ask for his own archives, and getting them, you can ask... Okay, if he's victim, yeah, okay. If he wasn't collaborator, and there are some papers about him in the archives, the person is able to ask for those papers, and getting them can ask for revealing the names of collaborators mentioned in this paper.
That's different than in the Stasi files.
And the person to whom the papers belong is able to make those names public. Only this person. Not the office, not the card, but the person. It's strange, but it's like that.
So it's different than the
Yes,
Stasi files.
in this sense it's different.
Because in Germany you couldn't... And another personal question is for my files. I had 250 pages. I had a girlfriend that then became my wife. Lots of travel through East Germany. And I'm bilingual in German. And it was a curious place for me. that East Germany. Lots of contact with the Czech secret police, but not a single word between the Polish secret police. There's nothing Polish in my 250 pages of Stasi files. I've always been curious about that. Is there any reflection on, was there some standoff between the Polish services and the Stasi?
No. The answer is no. The answer is actually, going opposite way. There are a lot of papers in German Stasi's archives about Poles and Poland. Stasi was involved in espionage in communist Poland, and they collaborated with the Polish communist secret services or not. And both of the sources are now in the German archives, and the story is that we have much more better access to the German archives than the Polish archives. And some Poles are looking for the information about themselves in Germany rather than in Poland.
I saw that you were discussing the purposes of lustration, and there were many things came out, such as the sort of desire for the truth, revenge, all sorts of things. But I think you didn't mention the most important thing, and this is really the future of democracy in Poland and in these other countries. And I think that lustration is a very important part of democracy. And I'll give you a personal example that my father died recently, and I went to Poland to apply for an inheritance, procedure because his family owned a piece of land on the outskirts of Warsaw. And I found out that this land was taken over by one of the court officials and somebody else. And so he's the expert of Sąd Okręgowy. And they just simply changed the land register and wrote it over for themselves. So I applied to have it reversed, And essentially, there are rules in Poland which allow that. And actually, I am told that there's only one trial necessary in order to do it, and it's relatively easy. Well, I'll tell you that I've been in court for 3 years, and every legal motion I've made has been thrown out. It's been suspended. Everything was made, and this guy just took over my land. And essentially, I'm up and down Polish courts, and they are all defending him and him holding this land. And now the consensus among my lawyers is that this guy is an important secret police official, and that's why, there is this sort of legal conspiracy to defend his actions. And so, I don't know if it's true, but there's certainly something totally out of ordinary, even in Poland, in this situation. So I think that, if there's completely lack of rule of law, that the Polish court system is the source of total lawlessness, that is something to be concerned about in terms of future for democracy, and it might have to do with the judges and the experts of the court who are the secret police.
I don't know if anybody can comment on that, but maybe we can take a couple of questions, and then the panel can answer more fully.
Okay, my name is Andrzej Burkhardt. I'm from Polish American Congress. I have several questions. One would be back in early 90s, we were hearing the term lustration pretty much in conjunction with the term decommunization. Historically, later, the second part of it somehow disappeared from public discussion. That has something to do with something that Mr. Wilstein mentioned. It is the reversal of the situation of the perpetrator and his victim, which unfortunately pretty much becomes a standard in the early 21st century societies throughout the world. My question that relates to this remark would be, how would you gentlemen try to explain this disappearing of the decommunization component? My understanding was that lustration was designed as a vehicle towards achieving the final goal, which would be the decommunization of a country such as Poland, which would be really the conclusion of the transition, as Mr. Naimski mentioned, transition which never ended. So how was this term decommunization, the goal of decommunization, lost in the process? Other than an obvious explanation is the disinformation. That's just one obvious. So I'm asking for some other possible reasons. Disinformation, by the way, it is quite obvious how disinformation is used against the essence of illustration. That Mr. Naimski also mentioned that it is being the discussion on illustration, on the subject of illustration, is becoming more important than illustration itself. So this is just an illustration how disinformation is used to derail illustration. But I'm really, in this question, I'm looking for explanation of the lost component of decommunization in the process. I'll limit myself to 2 questions now. The second question would be really a comment, but there is a question component in it too. As I mentioned, I work well, it's a civic work, of course. We work with the Polish American Congress organization in New Jersey. From our perspective, it is very important, illustration itself is very important, so that we ourselves, who commit our time and energy to working to integrate Polonia, we have some sort of idea whom can we safely work with, whom should we adopt as our officers, those that we can really lean upon when we have things to do. And quite obviously, information about who of our members of the organizations in Polonia actually has been sent to the United States with a secret mission of derailing the operations of Polish organization is, and who is not. That's an illustration of my thesis that illustration is very important for Polonia organizations throughout the world, and that was probably also visible in September when there was a conference of the World Polonias conducted in Warsaw. So the second part of this, back in late 2006, when Sejm was working on the new shape of the law regarding illustration, we were very hopeful and really wanted to welcome these new changes in the law. And then suddenly what happened is that this law has been in some way, its power was derailed by President Kaczyński's amendments to it. Can you comment on this? How did this come about, these amendments from President? Why suddenly the law was really derailed and destroyed, and my understanding is that the current status of this law is pretty much in limbo. Why did opposition come from President Kaczyński? Thank you.
I have a question to our American friends. How many American non-Polish speaking is on this room? Can you accept there's a 2 person, you and you, of course, organizer of this. Is there some American here? No. Yeah? You only? Okay. Because I think that this is very bad that Professor Oster, who wrote a book about this, is not present, and he didn't listen. A great expert, our expert from Poland, how complicated is this subject of illustration. And this is not only that Americans, it's a little bad for me that Professor Oster just left, because he could learn and write a next book, how difficult is illustration, of course, yeah? And we see this type of knowledge of history and everything, for example, of Iraq. Yeah? The same idea that expert or American government didn't know that this band Saddam army is making 500,000 of partisans. In German Democratic Republic, for example, they used Field Marshal von Paulus to organize an army. Yeah? This is part of history, and this is my example. And my question to our American friends, just desert two friends, send more Americans to learn something how history and the real world is working. Thank you.
Piotr Naimski presented a very impressive picture of an unified, very powerful anti-lustration front in Poland, which blocked, in fact, for these 15 years any real attempt of lustration. It's out of the question that there are very powerful anti-lustration groups in Poland, but I think that a real image is much more complicated. You missed a point that the lustration law was accepted in 1997. It was, of course, a very limited lustration which applied only to 20,000 people, more or less. In many cases, those who were accused of being agents were declared innocent by the courts, but anyway, this lustration worked for more or less 10 years. Even the next more important point was the creation of the Institute of National Remembrance, which was a Polish equivalent of the Gauck Institute, which in fact opened or started to open the archives of the secret police, and historians and victims had in fact an unlimited access to the documents. For some time also journalists have the access to the documents. And I would say that Polish regulations were very similar to the German regulations. Even, which is quite paradoxical, Polish regulations in some respects were more open, more liberal than German regulations. I would give such an example. In Polish case, historians had a full and unlimited access to the files of the victims, those people who were spied on. And in Germany, historians could get the access to the files of the victims only with victims' consent. So the system was not so bad in Poland, and now, thanks both to the illustration and Institute of National Remembrance, we know much more that we knew in the 90s about agents, secret police, all these files. The second point, which Piotr Naimski didn't make, is that, in my opinion, quite often the mistakes made by the supporters of the lustration jeopardize the idea of lustration. You mentioned the 1992 attempt, but I think that it was a very wrong way to deal with such sensitive matters as lustration and secret police files are. You said that documents were revealed in 92. Not the documents, only the names of the people who were accused of being agents. Only the names were revealed.
And signatures.
Yes, but I mean that the point was that the documents were not revealed. When you reveal the names, the basic, the elementary thing is to declassify the documents. So everybody, the public opinion, could verify the situation. If you reveal the names, it could be very misleading. Even the courts who dealt with these issues had difficulties in getting documents from the Ministry of Interior, who still treated these documents as secret. Revealing the names without revealing the documents leads to a situation where lustration cannot be carried on, in fact. Many mistakes were committed also by Law and Justice, which were not able to prepare a project of the law which would be consistent, which could stand the scrutiny by the Constitutional Court. I would agree with Artur Wołek that when you analyze the law prepared by Law and Justice, you can really doubt whether the intention was to have this lustration or to rather die in glory with the project of illustration who could not stand the scrutiny of the Constitutional Court. Many lawyers, not everybody, not all of them, being members of this anti-illustration front, warned that that project was full of errors, legal errors, of flaws, and that it could not stand the Constitutional Tribunal. So to make this picture really complicated as it was, we should mention not only the activities of an anti-illustration front which really existed, but also many mistakes committed for these, let's say, 15 years by those people who supported illustration.
John?
So I have a question. I have a question for Rector Naimski. It's on decommunization. I'd like him to comment on sources of documentation, monographs written about those members of the communist elite that during the period of shock therapy, Rector Naimski mentioned the period of the Jan Olszewski government in 1992 when Antoni Macierewicz was then Interior Minister. Shock therapy was going on then. And one way of looking at shock therapy is insider trading, that the communist bureaucrats had inside information. They sold, and then they bought, and then they resold back to the state Polish state property, which gave this elite a social base, an economic base in Poland, and that the objects of illustration, those who collaborated with the agents of the secret police, ultimately with Moscow, are in fact small fry, a secondary group, that they were really in the pay of the ones who now hold a lot of wealth in Poland.
Who would like to begin?
All right. So I start. I start with comments of Professor Machtiewicz. Okay, sure, I agree. I mentioned IPN as something probably I didn't stress extremely valuable. So I do it right now. I think that that Institute for National Memory is something in Poland which we I would say we should defend this place, because nobody is perfect and no institution is perfect. IPN is not perfect as well. But anyway, we should defend it. We should fight for money for the institute, and we should fight for the exact better law for the institute. I don't want to restart the discussion about 1992 illustration. The only thing I would like to say is, and I really think it, is that without the 1992 try, we wouldn't have any illustration in Poland. About decommunization. There were two questions which touched decommunization. First, okay, the second one was the last one in connection with shock therapy and 1992 and privatization of the economy in Poland, as I understood. I think that one of the very important issues necessary to understand is the way of economic transformation in Poland between 1888, I would say, and 1988, and 4 years, probably 4 years. And it's complicated, and communist secret services people were involved in this process for sure. The level of this involvement is to be discussed and probably to check by historians, researchers, and this kind of work is to be done. Some materials for this research are revealed in the documents. Post-WSI means post-VSC or post-military communist counterintelligence in Poland. These documents, or at least great part of these documents, is now possible to be checked by specialist historians and others. So we have a chance to touch this point. The second question was about disappearance of decommunization on a political level in Poland. This is an important question. It touches the nature of transformation in Poland. It touches the nature of breaking or starting point of the transformation in Poland. It touches round table provisions in Poland. It touches the compromise. And because of the first compromises, probably necessary or partly necessary. I don't want to start this discussion at this room right now. But because of the preliminary compromises, the full decommunization of Poland wasn't possible in theory and in practice, both. Some of us, me too, we wanted to keep this decommunization hope, I would say, for a certain time on a political level. And we failed. The claim, the cry, I would even say, for decommunization was a kind of politically lost case. It appeared in the mid-90s. So, some people, like me, we decided to work on that and not go for public with this. So this is why we were so much in favor of disappearing the last post-communist security service in Poland, for example. This is why it's probably necessary, worthwhile, or whatever you want to say, to support every effort towards the revealing of the, let's say, remnants of the communist structures in Poland, because still they exist. I can only mention, for example, private security agencies in Poland. More than 100,000 people, armed people, organized and trained by former secret service communist agents. More than police in Poland.
These are private companies?
Yes.
Like you have here.
Yeah, and you know, some of them, okay, it's another story. I would like to comment on what Artur Wołek said, ending his intervention saying about change in the, let's say, as he said, mindset about collaboration in Poland. And it sounded like you said it in a positive sense. I disagree. There is a change in mindset, but in the negative sense. Why I say something like that? Because this change is not in, let's say, moral evaluation of collaboration, but it's rather in prevailing loss of importance of those issues. Somebody, named publicly of being a secret collaborator in communist years is not afraid anymore. It's not a shame in Poland. It's part of the life, It's okay, it happened to me, it happened to others, it happened, So what? So what is the answer? The guy is being accused, and he is going public. He says, yeah, all right. So what? So nothing. And this is the change in attitude, in a negative sense. Thank you.
Okay. That's really nice that we work together and we can disagree. Perhaps this is a difference in perspectives. Even though I was lustrated under this law because I was born 6 months after before the threshold for those to be lustrated or not. So there must be a sort of generational difference. Anyway. I'm really much more optimistic than the general mood which is in this room, because there's nothing wrong about a person collaborating with the secret police, but the very fact of collaboration is not defended even by those who are anti-lustration front. Okay, so nobody defends the very fact of the collaboration. What was pretty frequent in 1992, even if the single person that is named the collaborator is not that obviously evil or whatever. Okay. I wanted to address this question of decommunization because, why it disappeared? Well, if you have a post-communist president that is elected by the majority of 68, I guess, % of voters, you can't just think about any decommunization because the people don't think they are communist anymore, and people don't think the communist heritage is important anymore. And perhaps this is the reason of your perception. Okay, that's really true that people don't think it's important, but a sort of the accounts were settled. And the communists lost, and this is the source of my optimism. And there is no more discussion whether the communism was good or bad, whether the engagement in the secret police was good or bad. Okay, there is a discussion about biographies, but biographies are always contestable.
May I address this point, Artur? Right
now?
Right now.
If you need.
No, the question is not about communists existing in Poland or not. Many people in Poland, or probably majority of us in Poland, don't think about communism as an imminent threat in Poland. they even, or we even don't think about communists living among us. It's not important. What we are interested in is the environment we are live in, condition of our life, some procedures in our country we don't understand, some facts we are not able to explain, and people are accusing contemporary administration about those things, not knowing or not being able to understand that some of those failures, I would say, are based on the remnants or our inability to solve the problems of the past. So we are in Poland troubled by many unpleasant circumstances, and we are looking for explanations, today, very close to us, very often, very rightly, but also very often impossible to understand without touching the communist past. And that is the problem. Because we would like, it's our even profession of some of us, try to explain to the people what's going on. And it's very hard to explain what's going on, not touching the communist past.
Excuse me, maybe, because I am the generation of Piotr Naimski, but I rather agree with younger generation. I am more optimistic, and it is also the answer for the question of decommunization. Of course, it's difficult to imagine now the law of decommunization. How could we imagine this law? But if we are watching our political circumstance, our reality, we are what we are facing. The post-communists are failing. It was in Poland during after the fall of communism for a certain time. It was the kind of post-communist division. The post-communists were the part of our political scene. They were one of the most important party, and they won an election. It was the president. And now what we are facing now? 2 years ago, after the great scandals of the SLD, post-communist party, governing, it was the falling down of the post-communism. But now they are even in worse situation. These two parties who are now competing about the political power in Poland, they are both from the Solidarność origin. And that's important. Of course, we could say a lot of bad things about what's happened in politics in Poland now, but these things, it's something very important. I have the impression that we pass over this post-communist period in this sense, in the political sense. Of course, there are a lot of other problems mentioned already. Thank you.
It seems to me that there is a generational issue here that we've been skirting for a while. When we look at people in the audience, we heard from a representative of the Polish-American Congress how important lustration is to them. The Polish Army Veterans Association is here. I'm sure that for them, lustration is an important issue as well. For a lot of the young people that have emigrated from Poland in the last couple of years looking for a future, looking for a better job, lustration is not at the top of their list of things to do today. And that is simply a reality. If they return to Poland, they may think differently as they get a little bit older and begin to wonder why things work the way that they do. But for the time being, it seems to me at least that many of Poland's younger people really are not at all interested in this kind of a discussion. That in fact it's the professionals, it's the slightly older generation that experienced some of the inequities of the regime in the 1970s or 80s, and we often skip over them. We don't talk about some of the pressing issues of those days which brought people into sharp opposition against the communist regime. And I think that underlies a lot of this discussion as well, because for many people, they simply cannot forgive. Somebody did something wrong to one person, to a group of people, to a lot of people, and those people should be punished for that. It is also true that this is something which is not only...
Nobody's punished, only discovered. Nobody's punished because of his collaboration with the regime.
Correct.
Correct. Important.
There is another aspect of dealing with the past which our Jewish friends have pushed very hard, and that is war crimes. There were crimes against humanity committed against people because of the fact that they belonged to the Home Army. And those crimes were committed after the Second World War. And it took a very long time until the Polish state got serious about prosecuting some people. And to be honest, I don't think I've ever seen a decent publication on the number of prosecutions that have taken place. But I can say one thing, that there are not so many of these people left, and that at some point in the very near future, this will cease to be an issue because everybody will have died. In the case of our discussion here, it will be a very long time before lustration goes away.
If I may, in the light of what Mr. Wilstein said about decommunization understood as a process of law, I feel an obligation of explaining that at least my personal expectation was not at all to create some laws to punish those revealed in the process of lustration for being former communists. This might have happened, might not have happened. This was not the main thing. I would rather agree with Mr. Naimski that the process of lustration was to just only reveal who it was, so that based on that, the voters might be better educated in their voting process to make the proper decisions, who is voted in and for what reason, and who is not voted in to the government. That at least was based on some wave of enthusiasm that, of course, erupted after the so-called fall of communism, which we don't really call the fall of communism today. At least that was the joyful interpretation of how lustration can solve the problem of decommunization. Thank you.
Well, instead of taking any more questions, why don't we do this? We have a reception waiting for us in the next room. Why don't we continue this discussion with our speakers over a glass of wine and a nosh. Thank you for coming. Tomorrow morning we will begin at 10. We have two panels, one at 10, one at 2:30, and we hope to see some of you tomorrow.